Good day and welcome to another episode on inflation presented to you by Rapido News Network. In this video, we will talk about what inflation means, how it is commonly measured, how it occurs, example of its occurrence, and how it is impacting your savings. So let's get started. Inflation is the rate of increase in prices over a given period of time. Inflation is typically a broad measure, such as the overall increase in prices or the increase in the cost of living in a country. But it can also be more narrowly calculated for certain goods, such as food, or for services, such as a haircut. For example, whatever the context, inflation represents how much more expensive the relevant set of goods and or services has become over a period of time. Most commonly, this period of time is 1 year. We can also define inflation as a process by which the currency like the dollar or euro loses value over time, causing the price of goods to rise. Now, to measure inflation, government agencies first calculate consumers' cost of living, which depend on the prices of many goods and services and the share of each in the household budget. To measure the average consumer's cost of living, government agencies conduct household surveys to identify a basket of commonly purchased items and track over time the cost of purchasing this basket. The cost of this basket at a given time expressed relative to a base year is the Consumer Price Index or CPI, and the percentage change in the CPI over a certain period of time is consumer price inflation, the most widely used measure of inflation. For example, if the base year CPI is 100 and the current CPI is 110, inflation is 10% over that given period. As to what causes inflation, there are a variety of reasons which can cause inflation. So we will start with cost push inflation. Cost push inflation occurs when prices increase due to the increase in production costs, such as raw material and wages. The demand for goods is unchanged, while the supply of goods decline due to the higher cost of production. As a result, the added costs of production are passed on to consumers in the form of higher prices for the finished goods. One of the signs of possible cost push inflation can be seen in rising commodity prices such as oil and metal, since they are major production inputs. To give an example of this, if the price of copper rises, companies that use copper to make their product might increase the price of their goods. If the demand for the final product is independent of the demand for the copper, the business will pass on the higher costs of raw material to the final consumers. The result is higher prices for the consumers without any change in demand for the product consumed. Now, wages also affect the cost of productions and typically are the single biggest expense for businesses. When economy is performing well and the unemployment rate is low, shortages in labor or workers can occur. Companies in turn increase wages to attract qualified candidates, causing production costs to rise for the company. Natural disasters can also drive the prices higher. To give an example, if a hurricane destroys a crop such as corn, prices can rise across the economy since corn is used in many products. Now, the second type of inflation, which is commonly referred to as demand pull inflation, happens, as the name suggests, when there is a strong consumer demand for a particular product or service. When there is a surge in demand for the wide breadth of goods across the economy, the price tends to increase. While this is not often a concern for a short-term imbalance of supply and demand, sustained demand can reverberate the economy and raise costs for other goods. The result is demand pull inflation. As the demand for a particular good or service increases, the available supply decreases. When fewer items are available, consumers are willing to pay more to obtain that particular item. The result is higher price. An example of this can be seen in a multiple price hikes of graphic cards by their manufacturers NVIDIA and AMD. due to the increased demand for their products. This kind of inflation can also be seen on various limited or numbered edition luxury watches of high-end watchmakers. The number of watches that are produced by these makers are far less compared to the number of people trying to get the same. Now, the third type of inflation is caused by housing market. If the homes are in demand because the economy is experiencing an expansion, home prices will rise. The demand also impacts ancillary products and services that support the housing industry. Construction products such as lumber and steel, as well as nails and rivets used in homes might all see increase in demand resulting from higher demand for homes. Also, a direct correlation can be made between interest rates and housing market. When the interest rates are low, which means that the government is distributing more money at a discount, more people tend to take mortgages and buy new houses, causing the housing market to surge. On the contrary, when the interest rates are high or federal banks are printing less money, more on printing money later, so stay tuned. Less people are interested in buying new houses, thereby preventing inflation. Now, one of the most important factors in inflation is money printing. If the money supply increases faster than the real output, then inflation will occur. If you print more money, the amount of good doesn't change. However, if you print money, households will have more cash and more money to spend on goods. If there is more money chasing the same amount of goods, firm will just put up prices. In history, we could look after examples where money printing eventually led to. The first example of inflation is the US Confederacy. It began in May 1861 with an issue of $20 million of interest-bearing treasury notes. The Confederate Congress continued to issue treasury notes throughout the remainder of the year, so that it had $105 million in such notes outstanding at the end of 1861. These paper notes depreciated almost immediately, setting off a spiral of rising prices that over the next 4 years threatened to undermine the Confederate cause. The principal methods available to finance this civil war were taxation, borrowing, and printing money. The Confederacy was able to raise little of its wartime revenue from taxes, and usually Confederate bonds found but a major market. Consequently, the government met most of its expenses by issuing ever-increasing amount of treasury notes. By the end of 1862, treasury notes outstanding plus issued by the various southern states totaled $500 million and was only worth 1/3 the amount of gold. A year later, amount had increased to $700 million and gold was quoted paper notes by 20 for 1. By the end of 1864, the amount of currency had risen to $1 billion and gold was quoted at 40 for 1 at the year end. The Confederate government was not only one issuing the notes in the South. State, counties, cities, and private businesses also issued their own money. Banks, which had been freed from the compulsion to redeem notes, specifically early in the war, issued large quantities of notes, and counterfeit notes swelled the country. As a consequence, the South experienced runaway inflation. During the war, prices in the Confederacy rose more than 9,000%. To compare, the prices in the North rose just about 80%. Although the collapse of currency came with the loss in the war, it would have occurred shortly in any event. The inflation in the Confederacy ended in a complete loss of values of Confederate issues and exacerbate the burdens of the war upon the Southerners. Now, for our second example, in 1921, $1 was equal to 90 German marks. By November 1923, the US dollar was worth 4.2 trillion German marks, reflecting the hyperinflation and loss in the value of German currency. Now, it must be clear from the above example that the inflation is a concern because it makes money safe today less valuable tomorrow. Inflation erodes a consumer's purchasing power and can even interfere with the ability to retire. For example, if an investor earned 5% from his investment in stocks or bonds, but the inflation rate was 3%, the investors actually only earned 2% in real money. Now we hope that you find this video informational. We will be very soon posting a video on how you can make inflation your friend by investing in the right assets. So stay tuned to watch that video and subscribe now. To never miss an update from us whenever we post something new, hit that bell icon. If you like this video, hit like. If you have any comments or suggestions for us, please post that in the comment sections below. Thank you.